Hi, Nancy.
Welcome to episode 101 of the Front Porch Book Club.
The Front Porch Book Club is a podcast that meets twice a month.
We like to dig deep into the relationship between characters and the worlds they live in.
Grab your book and iced tea and join us on the front porch.
Today, we get to interview Eowyn Ivey about her latest book, Black Woods, Blue Sky. Eowyn was raised in Alaska and continues to live there with her husband and two daughters. Her debut novel, The Snow Child, sold more than 1 million copies worldwide and is a New York Times bestseller. It was published in more than 25 languages and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Our book, Black Woods, Blue Sky, is hot off the presses. It was just published in February. It's already received lots of acclaim, and it'll be fun to see where this book goes.
Great. Let's get to it, Nance.
Welcome, Eowyn, to the front porch.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking with you both.
Well, we're so pleased to have you join us. But before we get to your latest book, Black Woods, Blue Sky, can you tell us, did you grow up in Alaska, and were you an outdoorsy girl?
Yeah, I did grow up in Alaska. Both my husband and I did, actually. So it's kind of what I've just always have known. And I really think in order to be happy in Alaska, you kind of have to be an outdoors person. You know, in terms of a lot of the other benefits that you get in other places, we don't have a lot of that. And so if you got to love the winters, you got to love to ski, I think, and get out in all of it. And yeah, I think that's the way to enjoy it the best.
We know you were a reporter for a local newspaper, the Frontiersman. But when did you know you wanted to be a writer, first of all? And then how did this morph into becoming a Pulitzer Prize finalist kind of writer?
Yeah. I grew up around books and reading. My father had a degree in English literature, even though he worked as a builder. And my mom was a poet, even though she worked as an accountant. So in my house, you know, everyone was always reading. We were always talking about books and appreciated good writing. You know, that was just part of my growing up. And so I knew that I wanted to be a part of that reading, writing world, but I just didn't know how to make a living at it. And I started out as a creative writing major, a literature major, but I realized I didn't really want to be a professor. And I was trying to kind of pick a more practical route. And so that was when I switched to journalism and started working as a newspaper reporter. But really, all along, fiction was what I loved to read. You know, so I wasn't reading the Wall Street Journal during my off time. I was reading novels. And I always hoped that someday I would find a way to try to write one myself.
What was that in you that you finally allowed to come forth and start writing fiction?
I have to give my husband a lot of credit. He's always been really supportive of me. And so I had been working for almost 10 years as a newspaper reporter. And I had thought that I would find time during my off time, you know, to try to write a novel, to start working on a novel. But the truth is, it was really hard to spend my days, you know, long hours writing newspaper stories. And then by the end of the day, I just had no creative energy left. And so a little independent bookstore opened in our town, Fireside Books. And I remember the day they opened their doors. I was so excited. And I said to my husband, I said, what if I took a pay cut, which is saying something because you don't make much as a small town newspaper reporter either. But I said, what if I worked part-time at a bookstore and then used my other hours to start trying to write a novel? And he said, let's go for it. Let's do it. And so that was sort of the whole goal in me working at a bookstore, was that maybe I hoped it would kind of fill my well as a creative person rather than draining it, you know? And that's actually really what happened. I found it such a stimulating, exciting place to work as a writer that then I started working on my fiction.
And did you read a lot of books about the writing craft? Did you have critique partners? How did this all emerge? I mean, your writing is so beautiful.
Oh, thank you very much. No, I did all kind of everything. Although the one thing I didn't do is I didn't pursue an MFA. I was kind of considering it. My mom had done an MFA for poetry, so I'm a master's in fine arts writing. But I was kind of starting to think about doing that when I got the idea for The Snow Child, and I started working on it actively. And I had kind of thought, well, if this doesn't work, if I can't make this novel work, maybe then I will go and pursue an MFA. But I kind of did a home MFA. You know what I mean? I was, like you say, all the books about craft that you can find. I went to writing conferences and workshops, and I toyed around with different writing groups. But ultimately, it was really the people closest to me that became the most important. So my mom, my husband, and my two daughters were my early readers all along.
Wow.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it was. I was very fortunate to have them with me along the way.
I do think of Emeleen's love for reading maybe being inspired by you and your family and those dark, long Alaskan
Absolutely.
winters.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because Emaleen is by far the most autobiographical character I've ever written. She's got a lot of me in her.
Uh-huh. And that would be in terms of her spunk, her love of reading, her imagination. Am I
Yeah.
on the right path here?
Yeah. I was one of these kids who had imaginary friends who made up a lot of stories. But to be honest, I mean, a lot of her fears too. As much as I love my family and I was very close to my parents, it was also at times a very terrifying family to be in. My dad had two sides to him, and I had a lot of fears growing up. And I put those fears, but also that sense of wonder and magic that I had as a child too. I kind of poured all of that into Emaleen.
Yeah, very nice.
Well, I sort of see that when Emaleen is debating this scary story of, I don't know, I have this secret. I saw something and I don't know if I should tell mom or is it wrong to keep a secret, right? We thought that was so beautifully written as a child would really experience it. The girl wanted to do the right thing, but from her perspective, she was torn as to what that right thing was.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, it was hard at times to step back into those little boots, those little rubber boots of being a 6-year-old girl, you know, and remember those feelings of knowing that things aren't right in my family, but some things are right and some things are really wonderful. And how do you try to fix something that's so much bigger than you are, that you don't really fully understand, but you want everyone to be happy and to be close, you know? It's a dilemma.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. I mean, I definitely felt connected to that little girl because we got inside of her head a lot to try to figure out what was going on around her.
Yeah.
So I really
that's really
that.
great. Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I was thinking that would be very hard to inhabit the mind of a 6-year-old so well, because you were able to capture the limited experience that a 6-year-old has and how they try to apply what they do know to the question at hand. They don't know what they don't know also.
Yeah.
Were you helped having daughters more recently who had been 6-year-olds or?
Yeah, absolutely. Although it's funny because my daughters are actually fairly grown. I've got a 25-year-old and an 18-year-old. But fortunately, they both happened to be working with young children at the time when I was doing a lot of the writing. So my oldest daughter was teaching voice and piano and working with a lot of young children. And then my younger daughter was working at a summer camp, because it is hard to remember, like, how did we talk and what, and it varies a lot, of course, between children, the kinds of vocabulary they have or the understanding of the world. But I kept running it by them, like, does this ring true? And they would help me adjust a little bit. And also both my editors have young daughters, or their daughters are growing now, but they're younger than me, my editors. So they were able to also help me sculpt that to get it hopefully as accurately as you can, you know.
It was a real takeaway from me. I work with small children.
Oh, do you? Okay.
And I am telling you, I thought you examining that was so beautiful and so dead on. I really enjoyed that part. But here's another part I enjoyed, because we have a lot of different things we want to talk to you about.
Yeah, great. I'm so
What
honored.
is this Alaskan wilderness?
Yeah.
And you set a vivid scene of what it is to be in Alaska. You describe the flowers, the plants, and the animals and the creeks that are running through the valleys and being up above the tree line and the boulders and all of these wonderful images of what I would think Alaska looks like.
Yeah.
So for that part of your writing, I would imagine that's a very creative part.
Yeah.
Why was conveying this setting so important to you that you put a lot of work and effort into it?
Yeah, I think in Alaska, the landscape kind of dominates our lives. You can't really escape it, not that you would want to. I mean, the mountains and the rivers, it's just so big and kind of all consuming. And I feel like, and I've said this before with my work, I feel like I'm kind of trying to understand my relationship with Alaska, trying to understand my complicated feelings about it. But I will say too that what I've loved about writing fiction about Alaska is it has made me see it kind of with new eyes. So I know that people from outside of my small community are going to be reading this book, and I want to convey it to them as accurately as possible. And in order to do that, I find myself looking at it closer myself. So, when I was writing this, I had all my flower identification books, and I would drive my family crazy because we'd be out for a walk and I'd be stopping and saying, wait, I got to get a picture of this and figure out what flower this is. And that was really fun for me. And it kind of made me fall in love with Alaska again in a new way. And each book has kind of been that in some different way, I feel like.
Yeah, that really comes through that you are enchanted, I think maybe is the word, by the Alaskan surroundings.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, there are aspects of it that are overwhelming and terrifying. And I think there's things about Alaskans, the people that live here, that maybe are a little bit of a different breed than some places. And I kind of hear that sometimes when people say, why on earth would Birdie want to move out to this shack in the woods? Whereas Alaska women will say to me, oh, I could really relate to that feeling.
Oh,
So I think there is a
interesting.
little bit of a culture here of people longing for that wilderness, wanting to be closer to it and to understand it better, maybe.
I think that really came through in these characters, all of whom seem to be very attached to Alaska, who are very independent, and they all had their own little quirks and foibles, but they were in Alaska for a reason. And they were in a remote community in Alaska for a reason. And then you even have people like Sid, who's like, hey, yeah, move into even a more remote cabin. That sounds like a great idea. I mean, Della's a little concerned, but really no one in the book is concerned about the remoteness. They're not
Yeah.
concerned, how can you survive? You do get the feeling that Alaskans are a group of people who understand the wilderness, the challenges, the benefits, and they're willing to face it.
Yeah, I do think that's true. And of course, there's just like anywhere, there's a huge variety of people in Alaska. But I think you do have to be careful in Alaska. If you ever start to brag about some wilderness adventure you have to be careful because you're going to be outdone by somebody. Someone will say, well, I did that hike and I went even further. I saw more grizzly bears than you did. So there is a sense of a certain kind of pride, I think, in the resiliency and the ability to survive things that other people would think, well, why would you even want to try to live through that?
A very niche part of the flora and fauna that you talk about in the book. I loved your description of the Sandhill cranes.
Oh, thank you.
In the book, one morning, just as we're getting to know Warren, he steps out of his house and he sees a flock of cranes migrating to their summer nesting grounds. You write, their reedy bugling echoed through the air. There was a quality to the sound that Warren found both lovely and melancholy, as if their strange voices were filtered through fog, or were coming through the veil between this world and the next. Okay, in Nebraska, we love the Sandhill cranes.
Oh, that's wonderful to
We
know.
do. 80% of the world's cranes converge in Nebraska on an 80-mile stretch of our Platte River during migration. And this year we hit an all-time high count on March 17th at 736,000 Sandhill cranes.
Oh my gosh.
How are you counting these cranes, Nance? Come on.
They do aerial surveys.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So this year,
Okay.
I was lucky enough to spend an overnight at one of our blinds, and I got to see them all coming in at
Wow.
dusk and then again leave at dawn. You're totally right about the almost mystical sound of their calls. Nebraska, we're Sandhill crane crazy.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Do Alaskans love Sandhill cranes as much as we do?
Yeah, I think we do. And in the farmers' fields, a lot of times that's where they'll land during their continuing migration. Yeah, there is something about them. And I think Alaskans in general love that sense of the change of seasons and what it brings and takes away. So as the Canadian geese come and the swans and the cranes, it's the sense of spring coming, and then as they're leaving, but I love the fact I don't think I ever knew that the cranes all converge there. That's amazing.
They really do. It's an unbelievable experience. And people from all over the world come to Nebraska in end of February and March to see this
Wow.
migration. And it's almost like primal or prehistoric. There's
Yeah,
something that's so ageless about
I agree.
seeing those birds. Linny, they're just tall and lanky. They've got this beautiful red stripe across their eye.
Oh.
Yeah, and there is something about their call. It kind of echoes and is strange. Yeah, they're very interesting. And I agree, they feel like a bird that has been around for a lot longer than we have, maybe. I don't know if that's true or not, but they feel that way.
Yeah, I think they have been. I think most birds are considered dinosaurs.
Yeah,
They've been
yeah,
around
right.
forever. It's interesting to me that you mentioned that about the seasons, because that really came out in the book too. There is a very seasonal quality. We're watching as in the spring, the flowers are coming up in the tundra, and then fall, and then winter. Like, we are really experiencing those seasons. So that is very interesting to me, that is something that Alaskans are attuned to. But of course it makes so much sense, because even the changes in light are so
Yeah.
drastic.
Yeah, I think the kind of extremeness of how the seasons affect us make us hyper aware. I mean, I think anywhere you live where the leaves change colors and things like that, but it is a little bit more extreme for us. And like you say, the light, I mean, we go from in the depth of winter at our house, we lose all direct sunlight for about 4 weeks. And in the summertime, you could go out at midnight and play a volleyball game. So there is a sense of excitement as the sun's coming back. I actually find all the seasons exciting. I love visiting places like Hawaii, but then I think I could never live here because I would miss those changes of the seasons, I think.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Arthur, because I read it very differently than she did.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking Nancy's probably right, but
There may not be a wrong and right here.
Okay.
Right.
So when you're writing about Arthur, my thought when I read him, I think you probably left this up to the readers, what I'm thinking. But who was his original mother? Was it the lady in the cabin, or was it a bear?
So this is where I'm a frustrating writer for some readers. If you ever get a chance to read The Snow Child, each of my books, there's aspects of it that I don't fully explain out to the detail. And the truth is, I don't have the answer. I don't know the answer. That's not what interests me in the writing process as much. And when I heard you two having that discussion, when I listened to it, it made me really happy, because for me as a reader, I like a little wiggle room in a text to kind of imagine different possibilities. And I think it does make for fun discussions with other people about a book. And so, as much as that's not a satisfying answer, I'm glad that you each had different ideas about who he really was and where he came from. To me, I'm happy. And I don't have a better answer for you. It's funny when The Snow Child came out, because there's a lot of discussion in that book about who the Snow Child really is. I had a young man in Italy write to me and say, I want to know, who was she really and what happened to her? And I wrote back to him and I said, well, I'd be curious to know what you think. And he never wrote to me again. I think he was annoyed with me.
You know what? It just never even occurred to me that people would have two different opinions.
Yeah.
I was just reading it with my lens. So to hear somebody else's perspective as being different to mine was kind of shocking.
Yeah.
But let's make it fun.
I really love that. That makes me really happy, though, because I would like my book to be something that you could just read and not overanalyze if you didn't want to, and enjoy the story. But if two people wanted to kind of start discussing different meanings or themes or the realities of what's really going on, and there's something there to talk about, that makes me happy.
Oh, well, good. That was our experience, Nancy.
It was our experience.
Yay.
And it really does illustrate that the author takes a story so far, and then it's like where the reader goes with that work is part of the creative process as well.
Yeah, and I love that feeling. And to be honest, it came as a bit of a surprise to me with the snow child, because with the snow child, I knew I was leaving some things ambiguous, but I thought I was explaining a little bit more than I was. And I realized that once it went out into the world, it was this funny feeling of realizing, and now it's with each book that I realize that. It's no longer my story. Like once other people read it, it becomes theirs in some way, and they bring their own knowledge and background and feelings and thoughts to it. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's a really wonderful part of the reading process, really.
Yeah. Speaking of ambiguity, we learn about the story from the points of view of Birdie, Emaleen, and Warren,
Mhm.
but we never get into Arthur's head.
Yeah.
For Linny and me, we thought that made him a more mysterious character. And maybe that was a decision that you made, that you wanted us to not know exactly what Arthur was thinking beyond just observing what he said, how he described what he was thinking and
Yeah.
his behaviors. I was wondering, was that purposeful?
It was, and I think that part of the reason is, so as I was, working on this book, I was doing a lot of research about bears, and I just found it fascinating how, as much as we can try to interpret the behavior of other animals outside of humans, we really can't know what it's like to be in their head, what they're really thinking. And I think especially with animals like bears that are at a very high intelligence level, they demonstrate what we perceive at least to be emotions and different things, but we can't really know what that's like. And I wanted to maintain that feeling with Arthur, whether he's fully a bear or sometimes a bear or never a bear. I wanted to maintain that sense of we cannot fully understand who he is and what he's thinking.
From your research about bears, there were two aspects of Arthur that I thought were so interesting. One was that he sees the world as overlapping circles,
Mm-hmm.
and that time is always present for him. How did you come up with that concept of how bears might see the world and reality?
Yeah, and of course this is just pure speculation on my part, but I did think a lot about like what does separate us from, other types of animals. Either we distance animals from us in the sense that we say, "Oh, they're so much better than us," or "They're so much worse than us." But obviously there's a lot of similarities, but there is some differences, and I feel like one of those is that we have the ability to document time in a lot of ways, to remember historic events and to talk about things in past and future. And I feel like that perhaps animals, because they just can't simply document time in that way, maybe perceive it differently. So it was me trying to a little bit step into his brain and try to understand how it might work. But of course, who knows really, right?
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating, though.
Oh,
Well, I love that you named our woman Birdie.
oh, thank you.
One thing that we talked about the last time was her accepting Arthur the way he was and loving him for who he was. I thought that she was living in denial a little bit, not really seeing him as different than maybe what he really truly was.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties in with this question for you about romance and love and accepting others for who they are.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the message that you wanted to give on romance?
Yeah, I definitely was interested in this idea of how people can stay in relationships where something is not right, where things are dangerous in some way. And they are, I think, blind. And I think both Birdie and Warren, for different reasons, hold out hope for Arthur to be able to overcome sort of maybe what are his natural inclinations. And it's a kind of blindness that I think we have when we love someone very much, whether as a parent or as a child, whatever kind of relationship we're in. I think love can make us sometimes ignore our better instincts, I guess.
Well, I agree with that. Yeah. And that's what I thought was going on with Birdie.
Yeah.
And because of that, forced onto her daughter is to ignore some of those things. She was scared sometimes, but she kind of had to figure it out on her own and just be quiet
Yeah.
or remove herself. She had to deal with it in her own way.
Yeah. And the truth is that I've sometimes thought about, like, I think that maybe Birdie and Arthur, they could have maybe made it in some way, but there was Emaleen to think about, and that changes the dynamics of danger and things like that. When you have a child, it does change maybe what your decision should be in those situations.
Mm-hmm. I was so delighted, and I did not expect to be able to meet Emaleen as a young woman. I really thought the book was going to end and Emaleen was still going to be a 6-year-old girl. And when we got to meet her as a young woman, I felt that was such a wonderful gift you gave us. Had you always thought that in this story you were going to have her circle back and reconcile that 6-year-old experience and her memories of that now as an adult, or was that something that surprised you as well?
No, I always knew it was going to be there. And in fact, in the beginning, the early drafts, we didn't get Emeleen's 6-year-old voice. We only got her adult voice. And it was sort of intertwined. So we got both, it was going back and forth in time. And it wasn't working for whatever reasons for the editors. I think the suspense was sort of taken away a little bit by knowing that Emaleen survived.
Yeah.
So what was new was actually stepping into Emeleen's 6-year-old self. I always knew we were going to come back to her and know that she was okay, because I feel like that for me was really the heart of the story. I feel like in ways it's gotten packaged both by me and the publisher as a romance, but really what it is it's this little girl's origin story. It's about how she becomes who she is and how it's complicated in life. The very things that hurt us or fill us with fear as we're going through life are often the things, and it's a little bit of a cliche, but what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. The things that we survive and see can sometimes add to our experiences and understanding of the world. And I think, and ultimately, Emaleen gets a lot from both Birdie and Arthur. I think she's a better person for having gone through what she did. And I wanted people to see that, I guess.
And I love how she becomes a botanist, which is so clearly connected to her time with Arthur.
Yeah, absolutely. Lynn, you might see this with the children that you work with, where the smallest little thing that they can get exposed to can end up influencing the trajectory of their lives. And you never know as a teacher or as a parent, when you teach something or share something with a child, it might set off their imagination and end up being with them for the rest of their lives. And I think it's a kind of wonderful thing that happens, that as a grown-up, we don't always recognize it, but as children, we experience it, I think.
And thinking about that, both of their experiences were different with Arthur.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
How would you describe Emily's relationship with Arthur different than her mom's? Because they had very different relationships.
Absolutely.
He was very different with Emaleen than he was with Birdie.
Yeah. I mean, I think that he had aspects with Birdie of being fairly caring, but you're right. The friendship kind of thing that forms between Emaleen and Arthur is unique. And I think that was the other thing I wanted to explore, is this idea that, romantic relationships for a grown-up can be a here and then gone thing. You can have a relationship and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. But the people that we choose to be parent figures in our children's lives, it forms who they are. And I just find that kind of an interesting dynamic, where romance is where we put so much interest as human beings. But again, the people that interact with our children end up affecting who they are. And so I guess that's really what I was interested in. And also to kind of show that people can have so many different sides to them. And I think Arthur is certainly like that, and that he can be so caring and wanting to teach Emaleen so much, but also can be such a threat to her.
Mm-hmm. He is definitely scary,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but he definitely is, for a male bear, there's a mama component of him
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
that he will take care of her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he had 2 strong mothers growing up, mom 1 and 2.
Right.
And so he seemed like he got the mother, the nurturer,
Mm-hmm.
instinct part of him.
My sense is that he's a little surprised of this friendship with Emaleen, that it's maybe something he's never experienced before. And I had a lot of fun writing their little conversations that they get to have. I enjoyed that part of the writing a lot.
Well, we love this the small town community with the tavern and the mishmash of people that are around there before Birdie takes off for the wilderness.
Yeah.
We have all been in those areas at one time or another where you've got the tavern and everybody floods in. And
Yeah.
I got that. And the people know who their cousins and
Yep.
all the people that live around there. Totally understood that community that you created for Birdie and Emaleen.
Yeah.
This little community stays in touch with Emaleen. She's 6 years old when she leaves.
Yeah.
And she can come back into that community. She experiences it different now that she's an adult. So can you tell us a little bit about this little community you created and the characters around it?
Yeah, it's funny because in each of my books, like I tend to be maybe an overly serious writer. I tend to be grappling with life and death and sort of heavy things. And in each of my books, it's some of the side characters that I feel like save me from myself. They bring a little bit of lightheartedness, and they often are the people that in ways I admire the most, which is kind of funny because they're not the main characters. But Della, the owner of the lodge, I feel like is this very people that live in Alaska, and I think probably anywhere really, these strong, big-hearted women who really reach out to everyone in the community and are just very smart in how they handle the variety of personalities that you get in these kind of places. And Sid is one of my favorite characters, and it's funny because he's one that I've had people say, we want more of Sid in this. And it's funny because he's actually has a lot of elements of my father in him too, in terms of being a big reader and wanting to talk about books and encouraging people to go out and do adventurous things. But there's a lot of Alaskans like that, and people who make funny choices where they could be making a ton of money doing a job that they have a high degree in, but they choose to live a very different life. And I think Alaska has a lot of those kinds of people. So yeah, it was really fun for me to write that. And the scene where Emaleen comes back and she's all the people are coming up to her at the bar, it made me think as I was writing it, I was thinking of in The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy comes back and they're all like, oh, and she recognizes them vaguely. I was kind of thinking of that scene in a way where Emaleen has been gone and come back, but they're still there for her and they still care for her. And I kind of love that feeling. It made me feel like, oh, yay for Emaleen.
Yeah, you get attached when somebody's small like that. The adults,
really
like, they attach themselves to them, and the kids maybe not feel it so much, but the adults do.
Yeah, absolutely.
They feel that attachment.
No, and I think we've all experienced that, kids that come into our lives for a short period of time, and you feel like they're a little piece of you, and you always wonder how they're doing and if they're well. And so, yeah, it was kind of fun to get to write that reunion of sorts in that way.
And I will say this about Sid, now that you talk about him, I know if I lived in that area, I would get my Adirondack chair and go to Sid's yard and sit at night and listen to his stories and talk to him.
Oh, yeah.
Such a likable person.
Oh, I love hearing that. That makes me so happy.
I just thought his character was great as well, but I like them all.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the book and reading it and cared so much about the people in it.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of suspense in it. And I guess we didn't really talk about that. I really worried for Emaleen a lot. I mean, my heart was like, oh my, Birdie is so in love and invested that she's forgetting that she's got this tiny little 6-year-old that needs her peanut butter and jelly sandwich and that needs a decent bed and needs to be taken care of and some kind of structure and routine for her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And stability. And then the bear, the wild, all of that kind of aspect in it.
Yeah, and I actually think that that's been a bit of a hurdle for some readers. And I will say that I used to read my Goodreads reviews, and I've gotten away from it now thanks to my husband, because he was seeing it was torturing me a little bit because I felt like people were judging Birdie awfully harshly. And he finally said to me, I bet you a lot of money that you can't stay off of Goodreads for a month. And I didn't want to lose the bet, so I've stopped reading them. But I will say that what I did read about it is I think some people struggle with that with Birdie enough that it makes them not like the story or not be able to get invested in the story. And I think that that's the kind of the downside of having the suspense, that maybe if I would have kept Emaleen as an adult throughout, people wouldn't have been as worried about her. But that is what creates the suspense too, right? It's a bit of a dilemma. And I feel like saying at the beginning, maybe, just so you know, heads up, Emeleen's going to be okay.
No, I'm glad that you didn't, because I thought you have to be along for the ride.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You don't know. At one point, I thought maybe Birdie's going to gut a bear out and wrap herself in it and walk out into the wilderness, and you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know.
And we had this whole big discussion on how real is it? Is it more of a fable or a tall tale? And I really just took it as, you're along for the ride. This is what's going on. You just accept it as it is, and let's see what happens.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I love it.
The other thing about Community that I really loved is it wasn't just Wolverine Lodge where people would come and gather, but you also gave us some rituals, like the big midsummer night.
Yeah, the solstice party. Yeah.
The solstice party. I thought that was so fun because that is so realistic about communities, and everybody comes.
Yeah.
No matter what beefs you have with other people in the community, who you're getting along with, whatever, you're all going to show up for the summer solstice.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think that is a really lovely thing about Community. And I think it's something that kind of gets lost. I think more and more people move around and you don't tend to stay in the areas that you grew up. And so maybe we lose a little bit of that. But certainly for me as a kid, like, I loved the sense that there was going to be a 4th of July volleyball game, and there was going to be a summer solstice party. And, it is that sense of ritual and familiarity. And like you say, I love that about the politics that gets set aside. Everyone comes, you put aside the old arguments. It's really true.
Yeah.
Linny and I just read Louise Erdrich's The Mighty Red, and I understand you met her at her bookstore in Minneapolis.
I did.
You both write from a place of deep respect for the earth. Have you read her books? Do you feel like you two are soul sisters?
Oh my gosh. So I'm so glad you asked me about her, because she has been a huge inspiration in my life as a writer. I read Love Medicine when I was in college. I will say it's the book that made me truly want to write fiction. I think because the books that I loved reading as a kid felt so foreign to me. So, The Secret Garden or The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, I love them, but it wasn't the life that I knew and I had lived. And strangely, even though I'm not Indigenous, there was something in Louise Erdrich's writing that just spoke to me, that felt real to me, that made me feel like maybe I can tell the stories of my own life and experience. And so it's funny because she actually came to Alaska while I was working on this book for what's called Tutka Bay. It's like a writing retreat. And I saw she was coming and going to be the keynote. So I attended, and I was just so excited to meet her. And when it was all over, and she had read The Snow Child, and I was just amazed about that. And everyone talked about writing. And at the end, she offered everyone her email address. And I felt embarrassed to write it. I don't know why. I didn't want to be too much of a fangirl, and I was like, oh, that's okay. And I didn't take her email address. So when the new book was done, I really was hoping that maybe she would want to read it. And I realized I didn't have her email address. So I reached out to a fellow Alaskan writer. He had it, thank goodness, Jeremy Pataki. I emailed her and I said, hey, we even talked about these bear stories when we were at the writing conference. Would you be interested in reading it? And she read it. And I think she loved it. I mean, I feel weird saying that, but she wrote a really wonderful endorsement for it. And then she really insisted to my publisher that I come down to Birch Bark Books and do an event with her. And it was just one of the biggest, dreamiest moments of my life as a writer. I could tell that she had read my book deeply and that she saw the influence of her writing on my writing. And it was just a really wonderful, wonderful experience. I kept feeling like I needed to pinch myself when I was sitting up there next to her. It was really great.
Wow. Did she identify what it was in your writing that she sees in her writing?
We didn't get into it in depth, but I know that in Birdie's character, she really saw an influence of some of the characters that she had written about in her work as well. And I felt like she understood Birdie in a way that made me really happy, because I did feel like some people were judging her awfully harshly, and it was really great to have that.
Between the two of you, I think you understand small town, and Nancy and I grew up in a small town.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Not as small as the Alaska small town,
Right.
but we understand where everybody knows everybody
Yeah.
and everybody's been there for generations and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think you both write beautifully for that.
But also these women protagonists who are trying to figure out, even as adults, what are they wanting in life
Yeah.
and struggling to find that. We saw that in the protagonist in The Mighty Red, and she had a daughter,
Yeah.
but still grappling with what is my place in this world, and not completely from a self-centered place, but from a place of acknowledging, hey, I am a mother, I have certain responsibilities, I would love a little romance in my life.
Yeah.
There's also this whole earth that I need to reckon with in some way as well.
I'm honored to think that there's been some influence of her work, and I hope it continues to influence my work. I actually haven't read The Mighty Red yet. I've read almost every one of her books, but that one's up on my stack next, and I'm looking forward to it.
I think you're really going to enjoy The Mighty Red.
Yeah, wonderful.
I do like that Birdie is very dimensional, and I think that's what makes her authentic. I don't judge her too harshly, I don't think. She chooses that remote lifestyle because she thinks that's better for her daughter.
No, you're
and
absolutely
in many
right.
ways, it is absolutely better for her.
Yeah.
Than being alone in a cabin.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a mom that comes home at night and had too much to drink.
Yeah, exactly.
There are certain parts of that she realizes she's not being a good mom.
Yeah.
And she's looking for other opportunities. The air will be cleaner, or the
Yeah.
lifestyle will be better and healthier for her and for her daughter.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, I think you really see it, and I appreciate that a lot. That's really wonderful.
Well, this has been great talking to you about this book because Nancy and I really liked it. What are you working on next?
Well, so this is a terrible confession to make, but every time I finish a book, I think I am never doing that again. It's frankly a lot of work, and you have to really humble yourself over and over again and listen to what the editors say when things aren't working. And it's hard work. And I feel like I kind of pour my whole self into it. And when it's done, I'm like, wow, I've got nothing left. There's no more. But I will say that my family is betting that give it a few months and I won't be able to resist, because I do. If I'm out for a hike or I'm washing the dishes, my brain just starts to want to make up a new story. So we'll see. Nothing yet, but maybe fingers crossed something eventually.
Okay.
Are you doing lots of promotional activities around this book right now? It was just released last month.
Yeah, it has been keeping me busy. I got to go to Minneapolis to be with Louise Erdrich at Birch Bark Books, and then I was in Tucson for a book festival. I'm actually getting to go to Paris and go on tour in France with my French publisher and stop off and see my British publisher. So yeah, I'm getting to do some fun things, and it's keeping me busy. So that's a good thing, right?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you think of those as kind of the fruits of your labor, or does it just feel like more work?
It's kind of both, to be honest. Yeah. If I didn't ever have to get on a plane, I would love doing book events. Like everybody else, I hate flying. I hate the stress of travel, but I love it when I get to talk to readers and hear what they took away from the book. And that part of it is really, really exciting to me.
Well, I bet you meet a lot of people who want to continue to follow you. How can our listeners best stay in touch with what you're up to?
Yeah, so I try to keep up an Instagram page and Facebook. It's just under my name. The one great thing about having such an unusual name is it's easy to find me. And I have a website. So on my Instagram, I try to share some photos of my life here in Alaska and different book events I'm having. And so, yeah, people can definitely reach out to me on there.
We will put links on our notes page to all of those social media sites.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well, this has been so fun meeting you and talking more about Birdie and Arthur and Emaleen and kind of getting the backstory on some of that and the creative process. So we thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I absolutely feel like you could fit in at one of these solstice parties and hang out with us up here. So.
I would have a blast.
That sounds like
seeing the northern lights.
Oh, there you go. Then you got
something on my to-do list.
All right, you got to come during winter solstice then and dress warmly, and it would definitely be worth it. Yeah. No, it was really a pleasure to talk with you both. I really enjoy how you two talk about books together. It's really fun. Thank you.
Is she not fabulous, Nancy? Come on now.
She's fabulous.
I just loved meeting her and talking to her about these characters in Alaska, and what a wonderful person. It is so great that we got her.
Yeah, what our listeners don't know is we had all kinds of technical difficulties trying to get the audio to work correctly. And how thrilling is it that we got all of that figured out and we were able to interview her?
Yeah, because she lives in Alaska, so we had some internet issues, I guess,
I guess so.
But anyway, we made it happen. What a beautiful human being she is.
Mm-hmm.
And so thoughtful as a writer, and all the nuances of creating a story of very believable people and their situations.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that some of the themes that we kind of picked up on, those were things she was thinking about and wanted to explore as she was writing this book.
Yeah, and she made some things not clear on purpose.
Yeah.
So it was okay for us to come away with two different experiences reading the same book. I thought that is pretty incredible writing, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think The Snow Child would be a very interesting read.
Oh, we might have to look at that for 2026. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, that sounds really interesting. Anyway, loved her. So glad we got her through her publisher, right?
Yes.
I mean, made the connection and got her, as busy as she is in promoting her new book. She stopped by and had some sweet tea with us, Nance.
Yeah. I loved everything about that conversation. And isn't that interesting that we had just done The Mighty Red and there's such a connection between the two of them?
Yes. Oh my golly. Well, people are going to love listening to this. I think it's just fantastic. I think, yes. It's because of her.
And I loved the Alaska-Nebraska connection on the Sandhill cranes.
That was beautiful, Nancy.
All the research she said she did about, for instance, the flowers, that really came through. But I think the impressive thing is it felt so natural and it felt like such an integral part of the story. Sometimes you read authors and it's like an information dump. It's like, well, they did a lot of research and they want us to know how much they know about that topic. And here it is. But the research that she conducted is effortlessly integrated into the story.
I would agree. I'm amazed at these authors we get, Nancy.
Yeah.
They have something, I sure do. And the research and the time and the criticism and the rewrites and all of that. And then just completely self-absorption into the book. And then it's done. And then, okay, now what? Because she just all in on the book for so long.
All in on telling that story. And then to have her say, well, it went through all these revisions because my editors saw this. And so she didn't even originally have the 6-year-old voice that we loved so much. That was something that, based on the editor's critique, she went back in and created. Now in this final form, that feels like it's so crucial to the storytelling, but that is a lot of work.
That is a lot of work.
You write this book, you think it's done, and the editors are like, I don't know. Could we have a little more of Emaleen as a 6-year-old? Oh, you mean like 100 pages of me reworking the whole story? Okay.
Yeah, a lot. But I'm so glad that she did, because that character is very, very important. And I think she got it spot on when she was able to get inside her head and be able to express in the book what a little child would be feeling and experiencing through it.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh,
definitely.
my.
Oh, this book is a treasure.
Oh, very good. Who suggested we read this one, Nance?
Well, we were contacted by the publisher
saying, right, we were.
Yeah, this is a new book that's coming out, and it looked so interesting. I thought we could not pass it up.
Yeah, when a publisher says that. I think this is the first one that we got that was a publisher says we should read it. Mm-hmm. I think they had good advice.
Yeah.
We'll do that again. That was good.
Yeah.
That was a really good read.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. Our website is frontporchbookclub.com.
Our episodes come out twice a month on the first and third Wednesday of every month.
See you next time, Linny.
See you next time, Nance.